In 1981, four young members of a California rock band vanished on a private jet flight, their plane disappearing from radar without a trace. For 19 years, the musicians remained missing, their fate a complete mystery that baffled investigators. But then, a deep-sea naval expedition pulled something shocking from the ocean floor, a discovery that would expose a dark truth no one was prepared for. The afternoon light filtered through the lace curtains of Helen Hayes' modest living room inn Crescent Harbor, casting delicate patterns across the worn pages of her book. At 63, Helen had learned to find peace in simple moments like these, her reading glasses perched on her nose as she lost herself in the familiar comfort of a beloved novel. The small coastal town in Northern California had been her refuge for nearly 2 decades. Ever since that terrible day in 1981 when her 20-year-old son, the lead vocalist of the band Crimson Fireline, disappeared, the shrill ring of the kitchen phone shattered the tranquility. Helen sighed, carefully marking her page before rising from her armchair. Her joints protested slightly as she made her way to the kitchen, the cool linoleum soothing beneath her slippered feet. "Hello," she answered, expecting perhaps a telemarketer or a wrong number. "Mrs. Hayes." The voice was formal, official. "This is Lieutenant Commander Jackson with the United States Navy. I'm calling with the Crescent Harbor Police Department regarding your son." St. Helen's breath caught. After 19 years, she stopped expecting these calls. "What's this about?" "We recovered what we believe is the private jet your son and his band were traveling on when they disappeared. We need you to come to Port Halston Naval Base." The words hit her like a physical blow. Helen gripped the kitchen counter, her knuckles white. "I don't have time for pranks," she said sharply. "My son vanished 19 years ago in a plane crash. I don't believe he's alive, and I don't want my peace disturbed." She hung up before the man could respond, her hands trembling. The grief she'd worked so hard to bury now threatened to resurface. Not only had she lost Saint, but shortly after, her husband Malcolm had been committed to a psychiatric ward. Though declared stable and released 5 years later, he'd returned to a quiet, isolated life, remaining distant from Helen and withdrawn from the community. The stress of their son's disappearance had changed him, utterly. Helen returned to her chair, but the words on the page blurred. She couldn't focus. The phone rang again, insistent. She let it ring 4 times, 5, 6, finally. Exasperated by persistence, she answered. "I told you, Mrs. Hayes. Please don't hang up." This time it was a woman's voice, calm and professional. "I'm Agent Dana True with the FBI. I understand this is hard to believe, but we've truly recovered the aircraft. The Navy wasn't playing a prank. Mrs. Hayes, we need you at the base." Helen felt tears prick her eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I thought. I'll come." "Thank you, Mrs. Hayes. Do you need transportation?" "No, I'll manage." Helen hung up and moved mechanically to prepare. She chose a simple navy blue dress and comfortable shoes, her movements automatic as she left her house for the train station. A familiar car pulled up. The window rolled down, revealing the weathered faces of Patricia and Donald Maddox. "Helen." Patricia's voice was thick with emotion. "Are you heading to the Port Halston Naval Base too?" Helen nodded, unable to speak. She recognized him instantly despite the years. The parent of Trent, their son, had been the base's in Crimson Fireline. "Come with us," Donald offered. Opening the back door, Helen accepted gratefully, settling into the leather seat. Patricia turned to face her. "The Kleins are on their way to Derek's aunt and uncle. His parents passed 2 years ago. And the Morenos, Ricky's cousins. Their parents died of old age. The drive took several hours, filled with tense silence broken by Patricia's occasional sobs. Helen stared out the window, watching the California coast blur past. When they finally arrived at the Port Halston Naval Base, the security was overwhelming. Navy personnel, FBI agents, local police forensic teams, and what looked like expedition scientists. Agent Dana Truitt met them at the gate, her badge gleaming. She was younger than Helen expected, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Thank you all for coming. I know this is difficult." She led them through the base to an open field. Helen's gaze fell on the same plane from the photographs Malcolm had taken. Her husband had snapped pictures with his film camera before the band took off, wanting to immortalize what he called their meteoric career. He developed those photos for memories and police evidence. Now the plane stood before them, a ghost from the past. Rust streaked its once white fuselage. Algae hung from the wings like mourning shrouds. The red stripes that had once been vibrant had faded to brown. Dr. Martinez, the expedition's lead scientist, stepped forward. We were on a deep-sea ecological expedition with NOAA, exploring hydrothermal vents. Our sonar picked up unusual metallic reflections. When our submersible camera confirmed it was an aircraft at 12,000 feet, we immediately contacted the authorities. He gestured to the plane. The Navy and FBI collaborated to recover it using a heavy-duty Marine crane from our research vessel. The wreck was remarkably intact, doors sealed, windows cracked inward. It's astonishing how well-preserved the airframe is. Helen's eyes found several body bags laid respectfully on tarps near the plane. Her heart constricted. Is that... Agent Truitt nodded grimly. That's why we need you here. For identification, Dr. Martinez added at extreme depths with low oxygen cold temperatures and minimal disturbance. Bodies decompose far more slowly. It's plausible. They're still identifiable after 19 years underwater. Patricia Maddox clung to her husband's arm. Please, we need to see. The officials exchanged glances before carefully unzipping the first bag. Patricia's wail pierced the air. Trent, my baby. Even after 19 years, the red leopard print pants were unmistakable. Trent Maddox, the bassist who always dressed flamboyantly, was identified immediately. The second bag revealed Derek Klein, his leather vest and distinctive belt buckle, confirming his identity. His aunt and uncle collapsed into each other, sobbing. The remaining bags contained men none of them recognized, neither the pilot nor any flight attendants. They wore expensive suits, now deteriorated but still suggesting wealth. The boys were supposed to meet an international record label and producer. Helen said quietly, some distributor. These men might have been part of their company. My husband was the band's manager, but he rarely shared details with me back. Then, though I believe he shared everything with the police, Officer Rodriguez, who'd handled the original missing persons case, confirmed her account. Malcolm Hayes became violent and was diagnosed with acute mental illness shortly after the disappearance. He was released 5 years later and returned to a reclusive life. We tried contacting him, but he refused to come. The forensic team approached, photographing and examining. A technician looked up sharply. Gunshot wounds. All the victims show evidence of bullet wounds. Agent Truitt's expression hardened. Then something very wrong happened in the air. They were likely killed immediately. The absence of the pilot suggests the plane was set on autopilot, and he parachuted out. Helen felt a desperate spark of hope. Saint and Ricky's bodies aren't here. Maybe there's a chance they're alive. It's possible, the agent conceded. No one's seen them. But we're shifting this from a missing persons case to a criminal investigation. The press descended like vultures, cameras and microphones thrust forward. A reporter positioned herself in front of the plane, speaking rapidly into her camera. Crimson Fireline. Saint Hayes on lead vocals, Trent Maddox on bass, Derek Klein on rhythm guitar and songwriting, Ricky Moreno on lead guitar. Many locals remember them from small bar gigs. They were starting to find success selling their music when they vanished. The families were interviewed one by one. When Helen's turn came, she stood before the cameras, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. I'd lost all hope, she admitted, but with this new evidence, I pray the police find something more about my son. Helen stared directly into the camera. Saint, if you're watching this, please come back to me. Come home. The other families continued their public grieving, but Helen had learned to lock her emotions away. When the interviews concluded, a police officer approached. Ma'am, we can escort you home. She nodded gratefully as they walked a patrol car. She glimpsed the plane one last time. For 19 years it had lain in the ocean depths, guarding its terrible secrets. Now those secrets were rising to the surface, and Helen wasn't sure she was ready for what they might reveal. The drive home was silent. The young officer seemed to understand she needed quiet. When they reached her house, he walked her to the door. Ma'am, if you need anything, thank you, Helen said softly. She waited until a patrol car disappeared around the corner before entering her home. Inside the hallway, Helen pressed her back against the closed door and finally let go. Tears came in great sobs. 19. Years of pain spilling out in the safety of her own home. She slid to the floor, her navy blue dress pooling around her, and wept for her lost son, for the boys who had died, for all the years of not knowing. After what felt like hours, but was likely 20 minutes, Helen pulled herself together, using the wall to stand. her knees protesting. She moved to the small study where her old computer sat. The machine whirred to life slowly, and she navigated to her old Usenet forum. She hadn't posted in nearly a decade. The support group for families of missing persons had been her lifeline in the early years. But eventually she'd stopped, unable to bear the constant cycle of hope and disappointment. Now her fingers trembled as she typed. They found the plane after 19 years. The Navy pulled it from the ocean. 2 of the boys were inside, shot dead. Say it wasn't there, I don't know what to think. Responses came quickly. Some offered prayers and encouragement, others, perhaps more, realistic after years of dashed hopes, gently warned her not to expect too much. One message read, Helen, after 19 years, please protect your heart. She lost track of time reading and replying. Familiar usernames bringing back memories. When she finally glanced at the clock, panic struck. Her doctor's appointment was in 45 minutes, and the bus ride took 30. Helen also wanted to visit Malcolm at his house. He deserved to know about the plane despite their strained relationship. She grabbed her purse and rushed out, walking as fast as her aging leg allowed. The bus pulled away just as she reached the stop. She waved frantically, but the driver didn't see her, frustrated. She checked the schedule. 40 minutes until the next one. A man stood at the far end of the bus stop, keeping his distance but watching her intently. He was perhaps 50, wearing a faded jacket and jeans. Something in his gaze made her deeply uneasy. Good day, Helen offered, trying to dispel the tension. The man didn't smile. His eyes were cold, almost hostile. I saw you on the news this morning. He said without emotion, your son. Thought he'd be dead by now. Probably sunk at the bottom of some trench. Helen stepped back. What's your problem? Another bus approached. Not yours. The man boarded without another word. Through the window, he continued staring, his expression unreadable but somehow menacing. Helen tried to calm her racing heart. Some people are just cruel, she told herself. They couldn't understand the pain of losing a loved one. She checked her watch. 30 minutes to kill. A payphone outside the local supermarket was 3 blocks away. She could call Malcolm, tell him about the news. The walk would clear her mind. The supermarket was busy, shoppers coming and going with groceries. Helen found a payphone and dialed Malcolm's familiar number. She told him everything. Malcolm had initially refused to acknowledge anything about the plane's discovery, but Helen eventually persuaded him to listen. I'll be there at 3, she assured him, right after my doctor's appointment. She hung up and turned to leave. Her blood froze. The same man from the bus stop stood directly behind her, having appeared silently. What? He said gruffly as she gasped. Helen didn't answer. She hurried away, her sensible shoes clicking on the pavement. She cast nervous glances over her shoulder. The man had picked up the payphone's receiver, but his eyes followed her as she walked. Something was very wrong. This wasn't coincidence. Helen quickened her pace, suddenly acutely aware how vulnerable she was. A 63-year-old woman alone on the street. Crescent Harbor's familiar shops suddenly seemed less comforting. She needed to reach safety, somewhere with people. Helen pushed through the supermarket's automatic doors, instantly feeling safer among the weekend shoppers. The familiar sounds of squeaking cartwheels and cash register scanners calmed her nerves. She noticed a bus stop sign to the window near the supermarket's entrance, closer than walking back to the original stop. The store was well-stocked, with displays of fresh produce and aisles of groceries filling the first floor. Helen had often shopped here over the years. Finding solace in routine, the escalator to the second floor hummed quietly. She gripped the rail and ascended, thinking of Malcolm. He'd always loved National Geographic magazines. Even in his current state, the photos seemed to soothe him. The second floor opened to the electronics section. Rows of bulky CRT televisions displayed the same image, her own face, speaking to reporters just hours ago. The news had already picked up the story. She stopped, mesmerized by the surreal sight of herself multiplied across 20 screens, pleading for her son to come home after 19 years. The reporter said, footage showed a recovered plane, its rust-covered hull dripping seawater. A woman with a shopping basket paused beside her. Oh my gosh, that's you, isn't it? You're the mother, before Helen could respond. Others began to gather. An elderly man touched her shoulder gently. I'm so sorry for your loss, dear. My nephew loved Crimson Fireline. A younger woman said, they played at Mickey's Bar every Thursday. The crowd closed in, voices overlapping with questions and condolences. Helen felt her chest tighten, overwhelmed by the sudden attention. She tried to step back, but found herself surrounded. "Please, give the lady some space," a firm voice commanded. Helen looked up hopefully, expecting store security. Instead, the man from the bus stop pushed through the crowd. Before she could protest, he grabbed her wrist and pulled her away, his grip iron-strong despite her attempts to resist. "What are you doing?" she gasped. He didn't answer, steering her toward an emergency stairwell. The door was marked authorized personnel only but stood slightly ajar. He pushed it open and dragged her inside. The stairwell was dimly lit, concrete walls echoing. Their steps. Helen wrenched her hand free. "Why are you following me?" The man's expression was cold. "Professional. I'm not your savior, lady. I'm here to watch you and deliver a message." He stepped closer, and Helen backed against the wall. "If you talk to anyone about this, police, FBI, anyone, it's over." In a swift motion, he pulled her close and pressed something hard against her stomach. Helen looked down and saw the black metal of the gun. Terror flooded her. "Please," she whispered, "if you know where my son is, if he's alive, you talk, and you can say goodbye to that possibility." He hissed, "Better sink to the ocean before they find you. The man I work for isn't kind." Helen's mind raced. "How do I know you really know something about Saint?" Helen demanded. The man studied her, then spoke in a low voice. "The lighthouse keeper's daughter waits on the shore, counting stars that fell before." Helen's blood turned to ice. Those were lyrics from a song Saint had been writing just before he vanished. He'd never finished it, never performed it. Only she had heard those words one late night when he strummed the melody on his acoustic guitar. "We know everything," the man continued. "Your bi-weekly doctor's appointments, your Tuesday grocery runs, your husband in Sunset Hills. We've been watching for years, my son. Is he really alive?" Helen's voice broke. The man stepped back, patting his concealed gun. "Keep your mouth shut. We'll talk again. But if you're reckless, if you breathe a word about this to anyone, I won't hesitate. Bad things will happen to you and your boy." He turned and descended the stairs, his footsteps echoing until they faded. Helen stood frozen, then collapsed against the wall, tears streaming down her face as she trembled violently. Her heart pounded so fiercely she feared it might fail. The emergency door swung open suddenly. A young store employee peered in, concern etched on his face. "Ma'am, are you okay? You shouldn't be here. Do I need to call a doctor?" Helen forced herself to stand straighter. "I'm fine. I just needed a moment." Recognition dawned in his eyes. "You're the lady from the news? I'm so sorry about your son." "Thank you," Helen managed, brushing past him. She'd forgotten the National Geographic magazine entirely. All that mattered now was getting away. She found the escalator and descended quickly, gripping the rail with white knuckles. The supermarket exit seemed miles away. Through the glass doors, she saw her bus approaching. Helen burst outside, half running, half stumbling toward the stop. The doors were already closing, but the elderly driver saw her desperate wave. "Please," she gasped. The driver, a kind-faced man who looked about 70, reopened the doors. "Take your time, dear," Helen boarded, fumbling for her bus pass with trembling hands. "Thank you so much." She made her way to the special seating area reserved for seniors and collapsed into a seat as the bus pulled away. She glanced back at the supermarket. No sign of the man, but his words echoed in her mind. "We've been watching for years. If Saint was truly alive, what had he become? Who was this man, and what price would she have to pay to see her? Son again." Helen stepped off the bus at the hospital complex, her legs still shaky from the supermarket encounter. The familiar medical building loomed ahead, its beige walls and tinted windows a testament to years of routine visits. She checked in at reception, went through the usual blood pressure checks, and sat in the waiting room until her name was called. Dr. Peterson was efficient as always, reviewing her heart medication and writing new prescriptions. Helen barely heard his reminders about avoiding stress. Her mind kept returning to the man's threat and those impossible song lyrics. When she finally left the appointment, prescription bag in hand, the afternoon sun was already waning. She stood at the bus stop outside the hospital, torn. The man had explicitly warned her not to speak to anyone, but Malcolm deserved to know about the plane. He was still her husband. Despite everything, she couldn't just abandon him. A car horn snapped her from her thoughts. Across the street, a dark sedan idled. The man from before sat behind the wheel, Beckoning with a curt nod, Helen's stomach twisted. She considered running back into the hospital, but his earlier words resounded, "Bad things will happen to you and your son." She crossed the street slowly, each step feeling like a betrayal of her better judgment. The man lowered his window. Get in the back seat, he ordered. Helen hesitated. "I don't even know who you are. Back seat now." His tone left no room for argument against. All her instincts, Helen opened the rear door and slid inside. The locks clicked shut immediately. "I know you were planning to visit your husband. You're waiting for the bus to go that way, not home." The man said, merging into traffic. "I can't let that happen. I won't say anything about you," Helen protested. "I just need to tell him about the plane. He has a right to know." "No, you can't. Just put these on." He tossed a pair of handcuffs onto the back seat. Helen stared at them in disbelief. "I don't know you. I don't trust you. I should have called the police. You're testing my patience." In a fluid motion, the man turned and grabbed her wrists, snapping the cuffs on despite her struggles. "Make a sound, and I'll kill you myself." Terror paralyzed Helen as he resumed driving. They left Crescent Harbor behind. Familiar streets giving way to highway, then to narrow roads lined with towering pines. After what felt like hours but was likely 40 minutes, he turned onto a dirt path barely wide enough for the car. A cabin emerged among the trees, small, isolated, windows dark. The man parked and yanked her out, his grip firm on her arm. Inside, the cabin smelled of mildew and old smoke, sparse furniture, a stone fireplace. "Little else. Why are you doing this?" Helen demanded. "The police will look for me when I don't show up. You can't keep me here forever. I can, and I will. Now you need to stay quiet, for your own good." He produced a roll of black duct tape and wrapped it around her mouth. Despite her muffled protests, he stepped outside, pulling out a cigarette and a cell phone. Through the window, Helen watched him pace as he spoke. When he noticed her watching, he moved farther out of earshot. Helen tested the handcuffs, but they were professional grade, impossible to slip with her arthritic hands. Panic rose in her throat. She was 63, with a heart condition, kidnapped by a stranger who claimed to know about her missing son. The man returned, crushing his cigarette under his boot. He moved to the far wall and pressed what looked like an ordinary wooden panel. A section swung inward, revealing a hidden compartment. He pulled out several small plastic-wrapped packages, each containing white powder. Helen's eyes widened. She knew exactly what those were. He peeled the tape from her mouth. She gasped. "What are those?" "You need to swallow these. They're drugs." Helen shook her head violently. "No, I won't. Kill me if you must, but I won't do this. Why are you doing this to me?" "I'm just a grieving old woman who'll die soon anyway." The man set the packages on the table. "My name's Edric Cambo. I have business with your son. If you ever want to see him, you'll do exactly what I say." "Please," Helen pleaded. "I have a heart condition. This could kill me. If you're any kind of decent man, there has to be another way." Edric drew his gun, pressing it against her temple. "I'm not a good man. Swallow these packages, or I pull the trigger. 3 seconds. 1, please. 2. With trembling hands, Helen took one of the packages. It was small, tightly wrapped. She placed it on her tongue and forced herself to swallow. Then another, and another, for in total, good. Edric lowered the gun and pulled out a vial of pills. "Take these. They'll help keep the packages intact inside you." Helen swallowed the dry pills, tears streaming down her face. "Don't ask questions," Edric said. "It's better for everyone, especially you. If you don't know much, this won't kill you. You're just transport." He recuffed her and tied her to a wooden chair with rough rope. "Someone will come for you soon. Stay quiet, and you'll see your boy." Helen sat bound in the dimly lit cabin, the drug packages sitting like lead in her stomach, wondering what her son had become for this nightmare to be the path to him. Moments passed in the dim cabin. Helen felt the medication take effect. A heavy drowsiness washed over her. Her thoughts slowed, disjointed. She prayed it was only the pills Edric had given her, not the packages themselves leaking their contents into her system. The room began to blur at the edges. She felt weightless, as if floating above the chair. Time lost meaning. Were it minutes or hours before she heard the roar of a vehicle approaching? Through her haze, she saw headlights sweep across the window. A large truck, its outline swirling in her drug vision. Edric's face appeared before her, his features rippling like water. "Time to go." His voice echoed from far away. She felt his hands unlock the cuffs, untying the rope. Her legs barely held her as he hoisted her up. The world tilted and swayed with each step toward the door. Outside, the night air hit her face like cold silk. Men stood by the truck, dark-haired, speaking rapid Spanish. They seemed Mexican, their faces hard and weathered. One grabbed her roughly, shoving her toward the back of the vehicle. "Get in, old woman," he growled. The truck's cargo area was larger than she expected, but the man didn't leave her in the main space. He pressed what seemed like the inner wall, and a section swung inward, a hidden compartment. "Get in. Stay quiet." Helen ducked through the opening, her drugged eyes slowly adjusting to the darkness. Shapes became people, women, all young, some barely 18. They sat pressed against the walls, silent and hollow-eyed. She was the only one over 30, let alone over 60. The realization hit her even through the medication's fog. She'd seen this in movies, read about it in newspapers. Human trafficking, drug smuggling. Now she was part of it, willingly or not. The secret door closed, plunging them into total darkness. The truck's engine roared, and they began to move. Helen found a spot against the wall and sank down, knees drawn up, time lost meaning in the dark. The truck stopped occasionally. She could hear muffled voices, sometimes the main cargo door opening. But their hidden compartment remained sealed. The younger women stayed silent. Clearly experienced in this horrific routine, Helen dozed intermittently, waking when the truck hit bumps. Gradually, the medication's effect began to fade. Her mind cleared, bringing the full horror of her situation. She was being smuggled across unknown borders with drugs in her body, surrounded by trafficked women. After what felt like, but was likely many hours, the truck stopped for good. Different voices now, harsh, guttural, speaking English with accents and what sounded like Russian. The secret panel opened. Bright lights flooded in, making everyone squint. A massive man stood silhouetted in the opening. "Out! All of you, move!" They stumbled into what seemed to be a warehouse. Concrete floors, metal beams, the smell of motor oil and something else. Something chemical. More men waited, all with Slavic features, all armed. They were herded into a side room and ordered to line up. Next to it was a smaller room marked with a radiation warning. Helen's legs trembled, partly from the long confinement, partly from fear. One by one, the women were called. Each time, the low hum of an X-ray machine buzzed ominously. When her turn came, she followed the man who shoved her forward and barked at her to press against the cold metal wall. Moments later, another man entered. The left side of his face was grotesquely disfigured, crushed and poorly healed, forming a permanent grimace. He carried a tray of small cups filled with liquid drink. He ordered to pass the packages. The younger women complied immediately. Helen hesitated, her hand trembling as she reached for a cup. The scar man noticed and studied her with disgust. Why'd they send an old woman? He asked a companion in heavily accented English. She can barely stand, and only have 4 packages in her. Don't know. The other replied, "Gotta ask the boss." The scarred man leaned close to Helen, his breath foul. "Drink, babushka, or I'll make you drink." Helen swallowed the bitter liquid in her mind. She cursed herself for trusting Edric. She should have let him shoot her in that cabin. At least it would have been quick. Now she was alone, at the mercy of these monsters. Take the old one to Bruno. The scar man announced, "He'll deal with her. Maybe we send a message to suppliers. Next time. Not some frail grandma who can't even stand. This is defective product." The other women looked at Helen with empty eyes. They'd seen too much to feel sympathy. The scarred man grabbed her upper arm, his fingers digging deep. Her thin muscles offered no protection. She felt his grip grinding against bone. "Move," he ordered, dragging her toward the door. Helen stumbled, wondering if she'd ever see daylight again. If this nightmare journey would truly lead to Saint, or she'd simply vanish like so many others who crossed these men. They left the room and moved through a series of corridors, each dimmer than the last. The scarred man's grip on her arm never loosened. They stopped at a black door, its paint peeling like diseased skin. He yanked it open, revealing a staircase descending into darkness. The temperature dropped with each step. At the bottom, another black door waited. He shoved it open and pushed Helen through. She stumbled, nearly falling, but he caught her arm again and jerked her upright. The room that greeted her was a nightmare made real. Red walls, red floor, Then she realized with horror as the smell hit her like a physical blow, raw meat and human waste. The stench of a slaughterhouse mixed with a septic tank. In the center of the room, 3 women knelt in a line, blindfolded, gagged, hands bound behind their backs. They trembled but made no sound. A man stood with his back to them, gun raised, aim at the first woman's head. Gerald, wait. Where's Bruno? The scarred man called. I need him to deal with this. The supplier sent an old woman as a mule. The man called Gerald turned, and Helen's world tilted. Despite 19 years, despite the different context, she knew that face instantly. Ricky Moreno, her son's friend. Crimson Fireline's lead guitarist, his baby face had barely aged. Still youthful even now. Their eyes met, recognition flashed in his, followed immediately by alarm. I think you're... Helen began. Ricky cleared his throat loudly, cutting her off. Get me a gag, blindfold, zip ties. He barked at the scarred man now. The items were produced quickly. Ricky moved with practiced efficiency, gagging Helen first, then blindfolding her, finally securing her wrists with plastic zip ties. His hands were steady, professional, nothing like the gentle boy who played guitar in her garage. I'll take her to Bruno. Ricky said, let him deal with this. Ricky pressed the gun into the scarred man's hand. You finish these 3. Even through the blindfold. Helen sensed the man's pleasure. I finish. Ricky's hand closed around Helen's arm, gentler than the scarred man's but still firm. He guided her toward what she assumed was the door behind them. She heard footsteps, the muffled whimper of a woman. They were climbing the stairs and the first shot rang out, then the second, then the third. 3 precise executions. Helen's stomach churned, but the gag prevented her from vomiting. Tears soaked the blindfold. Ricky kept pulling her upward through the black door, back into the upper corridor, his pace brisk but not panicked. This was routine for him. Helen realized her son's friend, the shy boy who blushed when girls spoke to him, had become this. They walked silently through another corridor. Helen counted her steps, trying to maintain some sense of direction, but the blindfold made everything disorienting. Finally, Ricky stopped. She heard a door open, and he guided her into what seemed a smaller space, an office perhaps, far from the warehouse's main floor. The horror of what she'd witnessed, combined with the shock of seeing Ricky, made her legs weaken. If Ricky was here, alive, working for these monsters, then maybe Saint was too. They entered the room, and Ricky paused. He knocked on an inner door. 3 sharp raps, a pause, then 2 more. Helen heard locks turning from inside. The door opened, and she was pushed through. Sit, Ricky ordered. Helen lowered herself carefully onto what felt like a leather chair, still blindfolded and bound. She heard the door close and lock again. Then hands were on her face, removing the gag. She gasped for clean air. The zip ties were cut next, freeing her wrists. Finally, cold fingers lifted the blindfold. Helen blinked in the fluorescent light, and her heart stopped. Saint knelt before her, her son. After 19 years, her son, the same long wavy hair, now streaked with premature gray, the same pale-skinned strangers had often mistaken for albinism, the same full lips and sunken eyes, older, harder, but unmistakably Saint. Saint, Helen's voice broke. Is it really you? She turned to Ricky, confirming what she'd suspected. You're Ricky, right? Ed had kept his promise. Saint said quietly. Ricky scoffed. That man's no less evil than Alex Sokoloff. Helen's eyes scanned the office. A nameplate on the desk read, Manager. Her stomach sank. What happened? You're both working for these people. No time to explain. Saint said urgently, and no one can know we're related. Understand. Before Helen could respond, chaos erupted outside. Men shouting in Russian and English. The sharp crack of gunfire, screams. Ricky moved instantly, bolting the office door. Saint went to a filing cabinet, yanked open a drawer, and pulled out 2 handguns. There's a phone. Helen saw on the desk. We should call the police. They'll rescue us. We can go back to our lives. No, Mother. Saint's voice was hard. This is our life now. What? Edric's men are taking this place. He promised to reunite me with you if I sided with him. He'll protect us. No. Helen stood, reaching for the phone. It doesn't have to be this way. Saint stepped between her and the desk, blocking her path, his eyes cold, unfamiliar. You don't understand. I didn't expect to reunite with my son like this. Tears streamed down Helen's face. You're not a criminal. You're a victim of a plane crash. Sometimes there's a thin line between victim and criminal. Saint replied, "We do what we must to stay alive." Heavy fists pounded on the door. Bruno, a thick Russian accent, called, "Open door. We're under attack. Alex is gone. We need a secure office." Saint and Ricky exchanged glances but stayed silent. More pounding, more demands in Russian. Then gunfire just outside the door. The Russian voices cut off mid-sentence. Helen heard bodies hitting the floor. A different knock came, lighter, almost. "Casual. It's me," a voice with Mexican accent said. "Edric." Ricky looked at Saint, who nodded. Helen watched her son grip his gun with practiced ease. Any innocence he'd once had was stripped away by 19 years in this hell. Ricky opened the door cautiously. Edric Cambo strode in quickly. Blood splattered on his shirt, the acrid smell of gunpowder clinging to him. He closed the door and threw the bolts. "It's done," Edric announced, wiping sweat from his brow. "My men and I held up our end. This empire's mine now." He looked straight at Saint. "I want your loyalty, both of you. I took care of Alex, nice and neat in his office. Put 3 peanuts in his head. Alex Sokolov promised us fame." Edric continued. "Said if we trafficked drugs and laundered money through tours, he'd make us stars. But he never delivered. Kept me here as his manager while he slept with girls and counted cash." Edric's eyes gleamed. "I'm not like Alex. As we discussed, I'll run this empire. But I'll also make you a real band again. Give you the fame you deserve. Don't worry about the drugs. Just funnel the dirty money for me. That's your part of the deal." As we discussed, Ricky stepped forward. "You can bring my parents. They're both dead." Edric said bluntly, "Died years ago. But I kept my promise to Saint. I brought Helen. You used my mother as a mule." Saint snapped, made her swallow packages. "What the hell were you thinking? Your mother was about to visit your father." Edric retorted, "What did you expect me to do if she told him anything? He had called Alex and blown the whole operation. Our entire plan would have unraveled." He glared at Helen, his tone sharp. "And if I hadn't made her swallow those packages, she wouldn't be here in your office. She'd have gone straight to the incinerator." His gaze lingered on her before shifting to Saint. "She was so hard to convince. Reminds me of someone else I know." He narrowed his eyes. "Guess none of you realize the police already found the jet." "They did?" Ricky asked, surprised. "News hasn't reached us here yet." Helen spoke, her voice trembling. "Yes, I saw it myself. The Navy pulled it from the ocean." She turned to Saint, realizing, "Your father knew about this." "All along." Saint sighed. "It's a long story. I'll explain everything later. Remember, Dad was our band manager." His eyes flicked to Edric's hand, hovering near his gun again. "I'll keep my promise, as agreed. I'll do my part." Edric extended his hand, and Saint took it. Their grips, firm but tense. "I'm sorry, Mom," Saint said, his voice low. "But this way, we could be together again and safe." Helen covered her mouth as the weight of betrayal crashed over her. Her knees buckled, and she braced against a desk. All these years, she believed Malcolm had broken from grief, but now she realized his time in the mental facility was a calculated escape. Once released, he'd return home quietly, dodging police and their questions. The man she'd married, her son's father, had orchestrated this nightmare. And now she was losing her son too. The 3 men began discussing logistics, body disposal, cleanup crews, which of Alex's men could be turned, which needed elimination. They spoke casually of murder, as if planning a corporate merger. Helen's eyes found a phone on the desk just behind her. Agent Dana Truitt's number was etched in her memory. As the men plotted, she edged slowly toward the desk. Her fingers closed around the receiver. She lifted it silently and began dialing. No, Edric saw her and drew his gun. Saint lunged the phone, trying to wrest it from Helen's hands. "Mother, don't." But Helen clung desperately. She heard the line connect, heard Agent Truitt's voice. "FBI, Truitt speaking." Edric's finger tightened on the trigger. Everything slowed. Ricky dubbed at Edric. The gun fired. Saint threw himself between his mother and the bullet. The impact spun Saint. Blood bloomed on his chest. He collapsed into Helen's arms. "Help!" Helen screamed into the phone. "Help us, Ricky." Slammed into Edric, sending the gun skidding across the floor. In a fluid motion, Ricky scooped it up and fired. Once, twice, 3 times for 5. The shots were precise, clustered tightly in Edric's chest and head. Edric crumpled, blood pooling beneath him. Ricky grabbed the phone from Helen's trembling hand. "This is Ricky Moreno." He said quickly, "I'm one of the missing band members, Crimson Fireline's lead guitarist. I'm here with St. Hayes, our lead vocalist, and his mother, Helen." Ricky gave their location quickly. "Saint been shot. He's bleeding badly. Alex Sokoloff is dead, but Edic's men are still here. Send a tactical team now. Units are on the way." Agent Truitt said, "Find a safe place and barricade yourselves." Ricky hung up and immediately began reinforcing the door, dragging a heavy filing cabinet in front of it. Helen cradled Saint on the floor, pressing her hands against the wound. Blood seeped through her fingers, warm and terrifying. "Stay with me," she pleaded. "Please, baby, stay with me." Saint's eyes fluttered, his breathing shallow, labored. Blood soaked his shirt. Pooling on the floor outside, they heard sirens approaching. Not just a few, but what sounded like an entire fleet. The warehouse erupted in gunfire as tactical teams engaged the remaining criminals. Helen kept pressure on the wound, her hands slick with her son's blood. She prayed harder than she ever had, begging God to forgive her son. The gunfire outside intensified, then gradually faded. Minutes that felt like hours passed. Finally, a voice called through the door. "FBI tactical team. Building secure." Ricky moved the cabinet and unlocked the door. Tactical officers in full gear flooded in. "We need medics," one shouted. Seeing the blood, "Did you check the red room downstairs?" Ricky asked urgently. "The incinerator, all clear," an officer confirmed. "The entire facility is secure." Paramedics rushed in with stretchers, gently but quickly pulling Helen aside to work on Saint. Another team checked Edric, but it was clear he was beyond help. "He's deceased," a paramedic announced. "Multiple gunshot wounds to the head and torso. Massive blood loss." An officer approached Ricky. "Who shot him?" "I did," Ricky said firmly. "He was gonna kill us all." They lifted Saint onto a stretcher. Helen followed, her blood-stained hands trembling. As they moved to the warehouse, she saw the battle's aftermath. Bodies covered with sheets, evidence markers, FBI agents documenting everything after 19 years of wondering. She'd found her son, but at what cost? They were let out of the warehouse into the cool night air. Emergency vehicles filled the parking lot. Ambulances, police cars, FBI vans, red and blue lights, painting everything in shifting colors. Paramedics loaded Saint's stretcher into an ambulance, while another team placed Edric's body bag in a separate vehicle. Helen saw Agent Dana Truitt stepping out of a black SUV. Newly arrived, the FBI field office was clearly farther than the local tactical team's base. "Mrs. Hayes," a paramedic called urgently. "We need to go now. Every minute counts." Dana ran toward them. "Go," she said firmly. "I'll see you at the hospital. We'll take Ricky's statement here." Helen turned to where Ricky stood with officers, his hands uncuffed but his posture defeated. "I'll see you later. Ricky, we'll talk." "I'll do right," Ricky promised, his voice thick. "I swear." "Thank you," Helen whispered. She climbed into the ambulance. The door slammed shut, and they raced through the streets, siren wailing. A paramedic worked on Saint, checking vitals, adjusting 4 lines. Helen gripped the bench seat, watching her son's pale face. At the hospital, everything moved in controlled chaos. Saint was rushed to the emergency room while Edric's body went to morgue. Helen found herself in a waiting room, harsh fluorescent lights overhead. Her heart pounded dangerously. Dr. Peterson had warned her repeatedly about stress with her condition. She forced herself to breathe slowly, evenly. She had to stay strong for Saint. A sudden cramp in her abdomen made her gasp. The warehouse medication was working. She called a nurse. "I swallowed drug packages," she said urgently. "I need to pass them." The nurse's eyes widened. "Come with me now." They took Helen to a specialized room. The nurse gloved up and gathered supplies. A bedpan, evidence bags, medical tools. "We need to recover them safely," she explained. "The packages could rupture if not handled properly." Helen was positioned over the bedpan. The nurse monitored closely as her body expelled the packages one by one. Each was carefully retrieved with forceps, inspected for damage, and placed in evidence bags. The process was humiliating but necessary. For packages recovered, the nurse documented, all intact. Afterward, Helen was admitted for observation. She explained her early-stage congestive heart failure to the medical team. They ran EKGs, drew blood, monitored her closely. The stress had strained her heart, but she was stable. Hours later, as Helen lay in her hospital bed, Agent Dana Truitt arrived with her partner. The doctors updated us. Dana said gently, Edric Cambo died from massive blood loss, multiple gunshot wounds, and Dana's expression was grave. He's alive, but in a coma. His heart stopped twice during surgery, but they brought him back. He's critical but stable. He lost tremendous amounts of blood. Helen closed her eyes. Thank God he's alive. Ricky told us everything. Dana continued. He's been fully cooperative. Do you want to know what happened in 1981? Helen nodded. My son never got the chance to explain. Dana pulled out her notes. According to Ricky, your husband, Malcolm, was their manager. He invited a band on what he called a celebratory trip on a private jet. Promised him a deal with an international distributor. She paused, but on board, they met Alex Sokolov. Malcolm revealed the true agenda. The band would launder drug cartel money through tours, funneling cash through ticket sales and merchandise. Helen felt sick. Malcolm planned this. When Saint and Trent refused, Malcolm and two cartel enforcers drew weapons. A fight broke out. Trent was shot trying to defend himself. Derek was executed for attempting to radio air traffic control, but Saint was spared because he was Malcolm's son. Ricky agreed to cooperate if they protected his family. He mentioned he was always the charming crowd favorite. Alex saw value in that for the laundering operation. Dana continued. Your husband convinced Saint to work for Alex by threatening to have you killed if he refused. After the killings, Alex needed to dispose of the evidence. The pilot, one of Alex's men, set the autopilot toward the Juan de Fuca Ridge. They parachuted out where Alex's crew waited with transport. Why wasn't it found for 19 years? The plane flew low, avoiding most radar. Pacific coverage in 1981 had gaps. The emergency beacon was removed, and the crash site was too deep for recovery technology at the time. Helen wept openly. My son worked for monsters for 19 years. I heard them talk about him taking lives, using women and children as mules. Alex and Edric are dead. But Saint and Ricky were just boys caught in my husband's evil. What happens to them now? Dana sighed. Malcolm is being prosecuted. The years he spent dodging questioning under the guise of mental instability won't protect him anymore. We'll file charges. As for Saint and Ricky, it's complex. Prosecutors could frame them as willing criminals. But we're emphasizing they were coerced victims. The court will consider they were teenagers threatened with family murders. Ricky's cooperation helps immensely with good representation. They could get reduced sentences or even immunity for testifying against the organization. Ricky's parents died years ago, Helen said softly. He may not have known, isolated as he was. He's at the station now, giving a full statement. I want to talk to him when he's better. That can be arranged. Dana stood. We'll keep you updated as things develop. After the agents left, Helen called a nurse. I need to see my son. They brought a wheelchair, helping her transfer from the bed. The nurse pushed her through quiet corridors to the ICU, through glass doors. She saw him. Saint lay motionless, connected to multiple machines, a ventilator breathing for him, monitors tracking his vitals, bandages covering his chest. He looked so young, so vulnerable. The nurse wheeled her inside and gave her privacy. Helen reached out, her trembling fingers touching Saint's hand. It was warm but unresponsive. My baby, she whispered, my sweet boy. Tears fell freely as she held his hand. 19 years of separation, of not knowing, of pain, all leading to this moment. Her son was alive but broken, shaped by circumstances no child should endure. I'm so sorry, she sobbed. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you. I'm sorry your father did this. But you saved me, Saint. You took that bullet from me. She prayed then, pouring out her heart. God, please heal my son. I know he's done terrible things, but you know his heart. You know he was just a boy trying to survive. Please be merciful. Let him wake. Let him have a chance at redemption. Helen squeezed Saint's hand gently. I'll fight for you, she promised. Your father should pay for his crimes. Not you. You were a victim, my love, my brave, lost boy who did what he had to. The machines beeped steadily, marking time. Saint remained still, locked in his coma, but Helen stayed, holding his hand. Finally reunited with her son after 19 years of questions. She had answers. After 19 years of absence, she had presence. It wasn't a reunion she dreamed of, but it was real. She would sit here as long as they allowed, watching over the son she'd lost and found again, praying for one more miracle. that he'd open his eyes and call her mother once more.